people! We're back online! Hello again, strong silent type. Hope you're shot in the head more times. It's good for the ads.
Ha! I lied. I said in the Void Stranger video that the next video would be about Lae'zel, but that one's actually after this one. Okay, really I did it because this is slightly more topical. Anyway, have you played Mullet Mad Jack? I did, and I thought enough about it that for the first time I'm going to make a video about a game during the same year that that game was released. This game looks at first to be a fun arcadey genre pastiche, and you can definitely enjoy it on that level, but there's enough lurking under the surface that it's worth examining further. I'm Juliet Necro, and I'm a goth trans dork who makes video essays for other goth trans dorks. I celebrated my 28th birthday during the process of making this video, and therefore I now qualify for calling myself Mommy according to the rules that I made up inside my mind palace. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button for Mommy, won't you? That's a good girl. Also, check out this sweet new avatar that was drawn for me by Despoina. You should commission her, she deserves your support. Links will be in the description. There's no super wordy reason for why I bought Mullet Mad Jack. I really just wanted it because it looked fun, and because I'm trying to play more games the same year they come out to have my finger more on the pulse. As of this recording, I've played Freak Hunter, Animal Well, Penny's Big Breakaway, Dragon Ruins, Nightmare Cart, Gestalt Steam and Cinder, Crow Country, and I'm currently partway through Amazing Grace. Of course, there is also Mullet Mad Jack. Mullet Mad Jack is a strictly timed arcade corridor shooter. I wanted to engage with it on that level because I've come to appreciate arcade games a lot more recently, but there are a few things that made me realize that there's more going on here than just that. The basic premise is that our boy Jack has to kill a bunch of robot billionaires to rescue the influencer princess. Evil corporations and damsels in distress are pretty normal in this medium. I kind of figured that this game was just playing up the anti-capitalism a little more, since it's somewhat trendy to vaguely gesture at capitalism being bad, even if the kind of politics that solves that problem isn't very popular. Yet. However, I wasn't giving this game enough credit. A few things were prickling at the back of my mind as I headshotted all of those robots. Chapter 1. Pre-Corporation. At the start of each floor in Mullet Mad Jack, Jack will yell one of a few lines as a battle cry. The first one I heard was, "Let's kill some billionaires!" And I was like, okay, Mullet Mad Jack, that's way more radical than I was expecting. The next one really caught my attention. The second thing that Jack said in my playthrough was, "Stop browsing social media." Your immediate impulse might be to say, "But Jack, you said to stop browsing while you're literally live on a streaming platform right now, CinemaSins ding." Hold on though, because this is a hint that something more is going on. Have you ever noticed how much of pop culture is vaguely anti-capitalist? You can probably name 100 movies, TV shows, or video games where the villain is an evil corporation. It seems like a contradiction, but it actually makes a lot of sense. If capitalism sells anti-capitalism to us, it defangs it. It makes us think that buying products is doing something about capitalism aside from enriching it. The first thing that popped into my head when hearing Jack say stop browsing social media was the book Capitalist Realism by the late Mark Fisher. I first tried to read Capitalist Realism in 2021, but I found the beginning of the book too depressing. I was in a very bad place at the time, but I returned to it after thinking about it again while playing Mullet Mad Jack. The main thrust of Fisher's book is that since the end of the Soviet Union, people in Western capitalist countries have not been able to imagine any system but capitalism. I was all but taught in school as a kid that capitalism was the best economic system, and then when I was older they tried to add nuance to that by saying that capitalism isn't perfect, but anything else would be worse. Most people can't imagine what life under some other economic system would be like. If you're my age, I bet you remember being taught by a baby boomer at some point that it was literally human nature to behave capitalistically. Naturally, part of Fisher's analysis is a discussion of recuperation. In Chapter 1, he writes,
What we are dealing with now is not the incorporation of materials that previously seemed to possess subversive potentials, but instead their pre-corporation. The preemptive formatting and shaping of desires, aspirations, and hopes by capitalist culture. Witness, for instance, the establishment of settled alternative or independent cultural zones, which endlessly repeat older gestures of rebellion and contestation as if for the first time. Alternative and independent don't designate something outside mainstream culture. Rather, they are styles, in fact the dominant styles, within the mainstream.
This is what I believe Jack is doing here. He says anti-capitalist things, but he's live streaming on a platform that's most likely from a private company. And his journey up the tower is sponsored by a corporation, Peace Corp. Jack isn't really on an anti-capitalist crusade. The idea that he is a product being sold to his live stream audience. It's the pre-corporation that Fisher mentioned before. It's a system of control so complete that rebellion against it, in which people, or robots, literally die, is a product for sale. In reality, things haven't progressed that far quite yet. However, part of late capitalism is to try and turn everything into some kind of business, even rebelling against business. When capitalism is this deeply entrenched, what hope do the people of Mullet Mad Jack's future have at stopping it? Killing billionaires is the status quo and doesn't harm the system. Scary thought. It's unclear to what extent Jack himself is in on the charade, but it has to be to some extent. His streamer handler literally tells him to his face that he's bringing in a lot of interaction, and that he's good for ratings. Let's not forget the whole reason that Jack got involved in this wasn't motivated by ideology, but instead out of a desire for a new pair of shoes. His ultimate goal is really to obtain a commodity, and there's really not much that's more capitalist than that. I must admit that this gives me some pause, as someone who is both a YouTube Rix and a holder of left-wing political views. Like, to what extent can posting to YouTube or any corporate website really be considered useful for advancing anti-capitalism? Not much. Whether you watch my videos or a bunch of videos by Ben Shapiro or some shit like that, YouTube makes money off of you all the same. I won't say that lefties posting on YouTube is useless. Education is always helpful. However, even if every single trans left-wing video essayist all did the fusion dance, we probably still couldn't make a video good enough to bring about the revolution and build fully automated luxury gay space communism all by ourselves. At the end of the day, I consider my videos to be somewhere in the exact middle of art and education. I am a former teacher after all. Like, I appreciate if you watch my stuff and stuff by other people of the same cohort as me, but recognize that that alone is not sufficiently anti-capitalist. You've got to do some other stuff too. I know it's scary, but to actually solve the problems afflicting our world, we're all gonna have to touch some grass. To some extent, this point of recorporation or recuperation is true of the game itself. I genuinely believe that Mullet Mad Jack was made with leftist politics in mind, but I did buy it on Steam, which takes a 30% cut of all sales made on the platform. Valve didn't do anything to make Mullet Mad Jack, either from a development or publishing standpoint, so for them to get a cut is video game landlordism. Once more though, I must stress that I don't think you should boycott Steam. I'm not one of those people who argues in bad faith that socialists should never buy anything ever. I'm just reiterating that consumption isn't adequate left-wing activity. Mullet Mad Jack's plot is very repetitive until you clear the third set of floors, at which point Jack gets shot in the fucking head. Chapter 2. Boredom and Dopamine. Despite having been shot in the head, Jack is too valuable a commodity for Peace Corp to let him die. They restart his brain, and we learn a little bit more about the dark future seen in this game. Humans have become dependent on dopamine in the roughly 70 years between the present day and when Mullet Mad Jack takes place. The explanation for why Jack dies after 10 seconds is that he is literally surviving off the dopamine from the attention his stream is getting. Part of the scene where Jack is brought mostly back from the dead involves having to watch 9 TVs at the same time in order to get the dopamine flowing again. As someone who can't do anything without a YouTube video, a podcast episode, or an album playing in the background, I do feel a bit called out. The most difficult parts of the video making process for me are recording and editing voiceover, and then actually editing the video, since those require my undivided attention. That's something I find very exhausting to give anything. I've seen people say that Mullet Mad Jack is a bit shallow, that the message of the game is basically, phone's bad, TikTok bad. TikTok is bad though, but it's because all algorithmic social media is bad, and I say that as a literal YouTube Rix. If you've never read Capitalist Realism, you might be surprised with how much of the text is Mark Fisher talking about classroom management issues in his higher ed classes, and where he theorizes they stem from. Fisher describes his students as having trouble completing tasks because they know how bad things are, but feel powerless to do anything about it. A state that he calls reflexive impotence. Many of his students responded by slipping into a state termed depressive hedonia by Fisher. Since his students felt unable to help their circumstances, they dulled the pain with activities that led to instant gratification, and shunned difficult work.
Ask students to read for more than a couple of sentences, and many, and these are A-level students, mind you, will protest that they can't do it. The most frequent complaint teachers hear is that it's boring. It is not so much the content of the written material that is at issue here, it is the act of reading itself that is deemed to be boring. What we are facing here is not just time-honored teenage torpor, but the mismatch between a post-literate new flesh that is too wired to concentrate and the confining concentrational logics of decaying disciplinary systems. To be bored simply means to be removed from the communicative sensation-stimulus matrix of texting, YouTube, and fast food. To be denied, for a moment, the constant flow of sugary gratification on demand.
By the goddess, if that doesn't describe me during the pandemic to a T. During the pandemic, I was a high school teacher. While I was lucky to have a job, I did not deal well with the isolation and the gloom of that summer. Since school was out, I stayed home for most of that time. For many days at a time, during the pandemic, I would get up and sit at my computer desk, half-heartedly playing a PC game or ignoring a YouTube video all day, DoorDash 2 meals, and then go to bed. It was not a good life, but it was all I had the energy for, between the isolation, the state of the world, and unknowingly being in the wrong gender. I knew that eating that much takeout was bad for me. I knew that I could be doing a lot of things that took more effort but were more enriching. But I didn't have enough belief in the future to make those things feel like they were worth doing. To some extent, I'm still breaking some of those habits now, or dealing with the fallout from them. Truth be told, for the first half of this year, I was dooming pretty hard for a variety of reasons. And I fell back into some of those patterns of behavior. Back in February and March, I constantly thought about taking up smoking, despite only ever having had one cigarette in my whole life. I'm very glad that I didn't do that. When one doesn't have hope, when the future doesn't seem to exist, it's easy to get stuck in cycles of self-destructive instant gratification. Fisher also points out how many of his students are suffering from depression, and ties it to the paralyzing sense of futurelessness inherent to capitalist realism. While external factors can't be blamed entirely for mental health issues, neither can internal ones, he points out. He makes the same connection with ADHD.
If the figure of discipline was the worker prisoner, the figure of control is the debtor addict. Cyberspatial capital operates by addicting its users. If, then, something like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a pathology, it is a pathology of late capitalism, a consequence of being wired into the entertainment control circuits of hypermediated consumer culture.
The boomer-ass take is to say that these kids are addicted to their phones and leave it at that. However, I think y'all are smart enough to know that addiction is not entirely the addict's fault. Because it's a quick source of dopamine in a world where hard work hardly feels worth the effort. Not only that, but a lot of very powerful people profit from us being addicted. My earnest hope is that in 10 to 30 years, we will view capital B, capital T, big tech, the same way we view big tobacco now. And plus, if we want to get petty for a second, the boomers are also horribly addicted to social media, and they don't even have the excuse of having no resources and working hard for no benefit. Who's really addicted, huh? That does it. I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. The Intermission. Alright, This is a much shorter video, but I'm still gonna record an intermission. It took me forever to record this video just because I didn't want to sit in my apartment with the windows closed and with my fan not running so I could get clean audio, because it's really frickin' hot outside. I really despise the summertime, and I can't wait for it to be over. But as long as I'm here, let me tell you something. If you want a good summer game to play, I should have thought about this before I said that. Oops. If you want a good summer game to play, I mean, first of all, there's Here Comes Nico. I made an entire video about that game. But also, I think Penny's Big Breakaway is summer coded as well. Like, Penny's Big Breakaway, it feels Sega coded to me, and like most Sega games are summer coded as well. I mean, just look at the AM2 logo. I feel like half the reason that both Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami take place at Christmas time is so that, they will neutralize the inherent summeriness of being Sega games so that, people won't only want to play Yakuza around Christmas. But yeah, Yakuza Kiwami is a Christmas game. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, all you people that won't shut up about Die Hard. Also, if you want a summer movie, how about Sonatine? Sonatine by Takeshi Kitano. I watched it last night, based on Lowercase J's recommendation. If you haven't checked out their channel, you definitely should. I think if you like their stuff, if you like my stuff, you'll like their stuff too. I am still in production on that Baldur's Gate 3 video. I got kind of burnt out on it, and that's why I switched gears to make this video for a while. But that one will be the next one for real this time. No more faking you out. Sorry about that. I think that should be enough for now. Thanks for sitting with me for a moment. Now, I'd like to turn from Shot in the Head Jack to the man who shot him.
Your courage, your death, just another product to be consumed. A few seconds of entertainment in a constant stream of bullshit.
Chapter 3. Is this the real life? Mr. Bullet is ostensibly the villain of Mullet Mad Jack. I say ostensibly because the real villain is capitalism, obviously. For a capitalist villain, his plan is surprisingly a bit woo-woo. He's trying to use the blood of the influencer princess to try every magical sigil he can find in order to discover something beyond reality. Angels, demons, other planes of existence, Mr. Bullet doesn't care. He wants to know if there's something more out there. In one sense, we can interpret this as Mr. Bullet looking for more worlds for capitalism to conquer. On the other hand, Mr. Bullet's real goal is to disprove that there's anything else out there besides capitalism. When confronted at the end of the game, Mr. Bullet is actually thrilled that there's nothing else out there, and declares himself to be a god. Fisher argues that capitalism doesn't want us to believe in anything, actually.
Capitalism is what is left when beliefs have collapsed at the level of ritual or symbolic elaboration, and all that is left is the consumer spectator, trudging through the ruins and the relics. Yet this turn from belief to aesthetics, from engagement to spectatorship, is held to be one of the virtues of capitalist realism.
Capitalist realism, as Fisher defines it, was born out of the triumphalism expressed by capitalism at the end of the Cold War. Everyone loves a good Francis Fukuyama meme. After winning the Cold War, capitalism stopped presenting itself as an ideology, and instead presented itself as natural, the opposite of ideology. Mr. Bullet is trying to do a very extreme version of the capitalist maxim of "there is no alternative," by disproving that there's anything beyond the material reality the game takes place in. Marx and Engels predicted all the way back in the Communist Manifesto that capitalism would try to strip any belief from the world except belief in the almighty dollar.
Capitalism has drowned the most heavenly ecstasies of religious fervor, of chivalrous enthusiasm, of Philistine sentimentalism in the icy water of egotistical calculation. It has resolved personal worth into exchange value, and in place of the numberless indefeasible chartered freedoms, has set up that single, unconscionable freedom: free trade. In one word, for exploitation, veiled by religious and political illusions, it has substituted naked, shameless, direct, brutal exploitation. The bourgeoisie has stripped of its halo every occupation hitherto honored and looked up to with reverent awe. It has converted the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science into its paid wage laborers.
Mr. Bullet is thrilled that he doesn't find anything, because it means there are far fewer alternatives to capitalism. This is even better for him, because capitalist realism presents itself as an almost anti-ideology. Since it teaches people to presume it's true by default, it could just change itself on the fly and people act like that's normal. Politicians flip their viewpoints as soon as the new conventional wisdom appears. Managers change the way things function without informing their employees and then act like nothing is different. It makes capitalist realism a tricky thing to pin down, since what it actually is so mutable. Unlike most ideologies, it's pretty inconsistent and its unwitting adherents don't seem to notice. But the people that are in charge of it, people like Mr. Bullet, do. We have always been at war with East Asia. The streamer also gloats in the ending cutscene about the fact that meaning doesn't exist anymore.
In the last 200 years, we have disposed the common people of any sense of meaning. Propriety, land, ideology. You lost all those things with little promises of becoming rich fast.
Conclusion. Is there no alternative? Naturally, one's response when someone wants you to abandon all belief and only consume should be to murder that person. Thus, Jack and the influencer princess kill Mr. Bullet. At the end of the game, Jack declares,
I'm sick of this phone.
However, a message from the streamer changes his mind. She reminds him that he has to come pick up the shoes he's won from rescuing the princess. What follows is precisely one round of the game's endless mode. When I first played this game, I actually thought I was done, assuming that the shoes were just the premise of endless mode. I didn't realize at first that there's actually an epilogue, and it really changes the nature of the game's narrative. I was reading it as ending on the hopeful note of Jack and the influencer, but the actual ending is a straight-up downer. The streamer and Jack finally meet, and the streamer admonishes Jack for coming back for the shoes. The fact that he was really close, with the car and the influencer, to finding meaning makes it all the more depressing that he goes back for the shoes, since he's been trained to see consumption as the only route to meaning, even though it obviously isn't. Because of his failure to find any meaning, he's trapped eternally in the game's endless mode. Capitalism teaches us that just working harder is the key to fulfillment. I promise you, you cannot grind your way to happiness. I was never a business type, but when I was younger, I was committed to the idea that if I did everything right, I would be happy. Thus, I basically did do everything right for the first 24 years of my life, and I was fucking miserable by the end of that time. That's what I'll say for now. More to come on that in the next video. Where real fulfillment comes from is not from any form of consumption. The subtitle of capitalist realism is there no alternative? It's derived from Margaret Thatcher's old slogan, there is no alternative. But Fisher and I both agree that there is, in fact, an alternative. And we need to stop pretending there isn't. I think the devs of Mullet Mad Jack were hinting that there is an alternative by having the streamer point out how close Jack was to escaping with the influencer. The answer is in real connection with people. The best thing you can do to find fulfillment in life is to make those connections. Nothing has enriched my life more than my friends. Real friends support one another when they can, and ask for help when they need it. And my view is that that should be the basis for politics. You might even say, from each according to her ability, to each according to her needs. Crazy, right? Obviously, neither you nor I have the power to make that the ruling principle of society on our own, but we can behave that way with the people closest to us, and make that into a continuing pattern that wraps around the world. Trust me when I say that mutual aid is a lovely feeling. It's not as easy as consumption, but it is infinitely more fulfilling. You can't find meaning in consumption, but you will find meaning in doing what you can for your fellow human beings. And that's all for today. Thanks so much for coming with me on this short little journey. This one's a bit shorter, and I hope you don't mind about that. If you liked what you saw here, please be sure to subscribe, because I have some really exciting stuff on the way in the second half of the year, now that I'm kind of recovering from my burnout a little bit. Also, be sure to check out the two channels of the readers that I had in this video. So, I had quotes from Smudgebap. She read all the quotes from Mark Fisher. And also from Maria, from the channel Maria's House. She read the quote from the Communist Manifesto. I will link both of their channels in the description. And like what I said before, if you like what I do, I think you'll like their stuff as well. Anyway, thanks so much. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.